You know, you think about the identity you have as a woman of color, navigating spaces where we typically do not show up or people are not used to seeing us. And back in Washington State, for example, there are legislative proposals being offered to combat the cycle of poverty that actually results from traffic enforcement.
Tell me about how your parents met. Your father fought in World War II, met your mother in South Korea while he was stationed there. I'm sure being an interracial couple during that time,
Right.
they had to face a vast amount of challenges.
And the one story that I tell is the one that my mother tells me. And you know, when we first came to the United States, we went to Virginia, which is, as you know, the Deep South, back in the 60s. And my father was wearing his Army uniform. My mother was dressed like she was going to church. And I was with them, and I was 1.5 years old. And my mom tells a story of them driving around all night trying to find a motel room and no one renting to them. And then finally, someone said yes. And so that was my mother's introduction to the United States, was that experience with her black husband in the Deep South in the 60s.
How aware were you of the challenges that your parents faced as an interracial couple growing up?
I think about the fact that my father joined a segregated army when he was a young man, and then my mother, who came to this country as a Korean American woman, and then there's our household, and then when we leave the house, we have to fit into mainstream culture. As I've gotten older, my appreciation for my parents, what they had to experience, the indignities they had to experience, and how desperately every parent wants better for their child.
When did you first realize that you had a different upbringing, that your background may have been different?
And when I was in 5th grade, and I remember sitting at the dinner table with a friend of mine, and her family was white, and I remember her brother and her father using the N-word. Like they were just talking very casually about it. And I think about how uncomfortable I felt and how I actually pretended I got sick and wanted to go home.
And that feeling of being another.
Right, right.
And have you felt ever, as a biracial woman, this sense of maybe not black enough for the black people, not Asian enough for the Asian people?
Well, I remember I lived in Atlanta one time and I was dating someone and he made a comment saying like, well, you're not a real sister. And even recently, the fact that I got elected to Congress was history making, and a former elected official who was Korean American, an older man, made some remark about, you know, my being only half Korean. I've been asked all my life, well, do you consider yourself more black or more Korean? And I say to myself, I am a hybrid of my cultural identity, but more than anything, I'm an American woman.
How do we get past that? The identity, the labeling?
As long as we as a nation are evolving and embracing the fact that people come from different parts of the world, people have accents, they look different, they have different food and culture, and as we think about what it means to become a nation that works together, we just have to focus on our shared values. I see the evolution of it being embraced as pride and identity and saying, this is what makes us American.
You've made history, but certainly one of the hardest parts about making history is getting people to see you in a space where someone who looks like you has not existed before.
Right. And I'm sure that you yourself have had that experience, you know, being in a room and wanting to speak and having people not see you, doing something and being erased and watching other people take credit for it, or just having to speak up and having people think that you're the spokesperson for your entire race. I think about the trajectory of my career, and you know, my career path has not been linear. And so my philosophy has always been, you know, be ready when an opportunity comes up.
Once she became mayor of Tacoma, I was like, okay, she's gonna go places. I thought at some point that she would try to be governor, but she said, you know, she skipped that. She just went to Congress instead.
We knew that there would be a new member of Congress from Washington's 10th district. Now we know exactly who she will be. Former Tacoma Mayor Marilyn Strickland.
You've seen her make a lot of history.
Absolutely. And I've been there to try to support as much as I can.
What's funny sometimes, though, is that people see you somewhere before you imagine yourself there. And when I left the mayor's office, I really didn't think I was going to run for office again. And so, you know, I thought about the growth that's happening here.
My cousin in particular that looks up to Marilyn too, and I've been encouraging her to get involved in politics. She actually is a good speaker as well.
Yeah. But I think what's important too is that, I mean, as Harumi said, like, you know, the more you see yourself represented, the more able you are to believe that, okay, I can do this, I can do this.
It was the first woman of color to be elected mayor of Tacoma. I was the first person of color to actually serve as the CEO of the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. I am the first African American to serve in Congress, not just from Washington State, but from the Pacific Northwest. And I'm one of 3 Korean American women to serve in Congress ever. And so being the first is something that isn't necessarily new to me, and I don't pursue these things because I want to be the first, but believe me, when you're the first, you never want to be the last. And so you have a duty to ensure that you're trying to cultivate and help others come after you.
Do you ever think about some of the little girls out there and go back to your own childhood and think about how you looked up and maybe didn't see women of color represented in certain spaces, and now there is a new generation that will grow up not knowing what that is like?
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, I even go back to the fact that you have a generation of young people whose first president was Barack Obama. But you raise a really good point, because this is about seeing yourself and envisioning yourself. You know, when I wore my hanbok on the House floor, it was something that I did to honor my mother and to honor my culture, and I had no idea that it would get the attention that it did. I was getting calls from Korea, letters. I had someone from Massachusetts send me a piece of glass art, which was an image of a little girl wearing a hanbok. And I tell that story because I say, don't let anyone tell you that representation doesn't matter.
Is Congress a good representation of the diversity reflected in our nation?
So the 117th Congress is the most diverse Congress in its history. So with each successive election, you see more people of diverse backgrounds stepping up. And you know, when we talk about diversity too, it is in every possible sense of the word, because we know that every congressional district is different. And so you see more people of color, you see more women. You know, women make up 51% of the electorate, and we're still 20-25% of Congress. So clearly we have more work to do.
Coming up, the job making lasting changes in policy to benefit their communities.
Just got done with my floor duty. So I was floor manager for the first time for 4 different bills.
My honor to serve. It's 1:45 in the morning in Washington, D.C., but I'm proud to be here to do the people's work.
How do freshman congresswomen navigate these historic times? Stay with us.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.